Electricity is by far the most important thing to our lives, and we usually hardly even recognize it. Phones, laptops, cars, lights, the very welds in the chairs you're sitting in all require electricity. And the majority of our electricity comes from fossil fuels. And with a survey conducted for this class, 80% of you are interested in an alternative to fossil fuels. So instead of beating a dead horse on why fossil fuels are bad, I instead would like to speak on what we can do instead: nuclear energy. This is not necessarily a brand new idea. Every purple dot you see here is a nuclear energy facility, either active or inactive, in the United States. And in Michigan specifically, we have 3 of them. So we already have this issue in our mitten, and I believe we should be playing more ball with it. And personally, I have done a lot of research on this topic, too much in fact to include in this 10-11-minute speech, and have had a more in-depth look into radiation and its items through my well technology classes, as some welds do require radioactive equipment to reduce certain welds, and does produce a tier of radioactive waste, which we'll get into later. So with this in mind, nuclear energy is the best option we have for our energy needs because it is safe, all waste is regulated, and it has the least macro danger. Now, with these things in mind, radiation is the one where I'd like to start because radiation is the one with by far the most negative connotation. I say radiation, people think radioactive mutant squirrels or something to that effect. It's not that interesting. And when it comes to explaining what radiation is and the danger effects of it, it can be a bit difficult because I can say millirem or microsievert of radiation, but that's not going to mean much. So instead, I'd like to provide a way for us to have a more realistic and everyday measurement device to make more sense of radiation and to better understand it and its health effects. With this in mind, the United States Environmental Protection Agency in 2023 states that, quote, each banana can emit 0.01 millirems or 0.1 microsieverts of radiation. Yes, we're going to use a banana for scale because it's an item that we've all seen and experienced on our day-to-day lives. We know that bananas contain potassium. Potassium is radioactive, and we know that since this is radioactive, we can compare it to other items to help make more sense of that radiation. So, with this, the University of California, who's the #1 college in the US for green energy and has had a 244% increase in green energy in 2016, did a study in 2017 on radiation with bananas as a measurement tool. So as we can see here, 1 banana is 0.1 microsieverts of radiation, or 1 banana. 1 here, neighboring to a nuclear power plant, is worth 0.9 bananas of radiation. 1 day on this planet we call home is worth 100 bananas of radiation. The food that you eat in a single year, just the regular food, is worth 80,000 bananas of radiation, and the proof of increased death and cancer, the amount you need to have provable harm to the human body, is 1 million bananas. I do not recommend consuming 1 million bananas if that was your plan for the summer. However, this does paint an important picture because it puts radiation into a better perspective for us to understand. So, if you were ever concerned about the nuclear power plant that's built next door or will be built next door causing you radioactive harm, bear in mind that a single banana a year is worse for your radioactive health than an entire year spent next door within rock-throwing distance of a nuclear power plant. So, with this in mind, we can now move from the radiation itself into how that is regulated within the facility. So the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Committee, or the NRC as I will often refer to them as, is composed of 5 executives who are given by the President and then confirmed by the Senate in the same way that we confirm Supreme Court justices. Suffice to say, these people are qualified for the job. And their job is the regulation and licensing of nuclear facilities. And as you can see here, there are too many for me to go into individually. However, I would like to highlight some important ones. So for the reactors, we have the operating licensing process and design verification requiring that you know how to properly train your own employees within your facility before you may begin creation of your facility, as well as the how and why and design of your facility must be approved. Now, moving on to the materials and radioactive waste, we can see a theme here of uranium recovery, materials environmental review, high-level waste disposal, spent fuel storage. These are all licensing requirements. That means that it is a requirement, not an option like it is for other energy sources, but a requirement that all waste be regulated and all pollution be prevented. And mind you, this is something you must do before you even begin constructing the facility itself. However, we also have the export and import regulations to ensure that anything going in or out of the facility is both regulated, safe, and appropriate. So, with this in mind, we've now moved from the health factors and the regulation. Let's now move on to the actual waste itself. So, when it comes to this, the World Nuclear Association in 2022 gives that there are 3 tiers of radioactive waste: high, medium, and low. High and medium are the ones that we have to worry about because they contain the majority of the radioactivity, even though they are the smallest quantity. And these must be disposed of properly. As the World Nuclear Association states, quote, "Unlike all other forms of thermal electricity generation, all waste is regulated, none is allowed to cause pollution." Again, it is not an option, it is a requirement for nuclear energy to be environmentally friendly. So when it comes to disposing of this radioactive waste, there's 2 ways done. It's either this form of burial, where it is basically encased over and over again like a Russian Makushka doll, and then buried far away from any humans or anyone it could damage. As well, it can also be allowed to de-radioactivate into a non-radioactive biomass that can simply be returned to the environment. Uranium is essentially just a radioactive rock, so if you remove the radiation, then it's just a rock you can return. But out of this, there is also low-tier radioactive waste. So at the very top of the presentation, I spoke about welding department. So in our Barrack welding department, you could walk over there right now if you wish. We do produce low-tier radioactive waste. However, low-tier radioactive waste contains such a low amount of radioactivity that it requires no special disposal. It can simply be removed of traditionally. So for the welding department, that means that the 2% thoriated tungsten rods that we use, thorium being the radioactive part, is low-tier radioactive waste, but when we are done, we simply place it in the same metal recycling dumpster that we do for all other metals. It requires no special disposal regulations. However, NASA's own Ohio nuclear facility also can do it a bit different way because they are so far away from other human-made civilizations. They can simply have their waste buried in their basement because it still falls within the appropriate guidelines. There's no hard and fast rule, but there are still very strict regulations on all waste. So, with this in mind, let's now move on from the nuclear safety and its waste into the worst case scenarios. So, while we would like for nothing bad to ever happen in our world, bad things do happen. And it's important to put them into context and to understand them. The World Nuclear Association states themselves that no one is immune to incident. And out of the 60 years that we've had nuclear energy, we have only had 2 critical incidents: Fukushima and Chernobyl. And out of this, it's important to keep in mind that the failures aren't necessarily what you're thinking of with the explosions and mushroom clouds. That's simply incorrect. The World Nuclear Association asserts that it should be emphasized that a commercial type nuclear power plant cannot, under any circumstances, explode like a bomb. The fuel is enriched to 5%, and it must be enriched to a much, much greater percentage in order for it to explode. So when they fail, it's a much, much less interesting affair of either the reactor cracks and breaks and radiation is leaked, or the reactor completely fails and the radioactivity, air, and other things are pushed out the bottom top of the facility to prevent any sort of rupture. This is why nuclear facilities are often shaped kind of like bowls, so that can be removed from them without having to conceal all of that energy. And out of the 2 incidents we have, Richie in 2017 from ourworldandData.org that collects information from all the countries to provide this kind of information because these incidents happened in different countries, provides that out of the 2 worst case scenarios we had 2,800 deaths. Now, it's a little bit unfair to say this because Fukushima particularly can be a bit difficult because it was a nuclear facility on an island that didn't necessarily fail on its own accord. An earthquake and tsunami hit the island and caused the reactor to fail. So all the sources I could find couldn't differentiate what deaths were caused by the earthquake, what were caused by the tsunami, and what was caused by the nuclear facility. However, for the sake of argument, we will lean against nuclear energy to make the numbers and point that much more impactful. So, with this in mind, Guerrera et al. From Harvard School of Public Health gives that fossil fuel pollution, just air pollution, in 2018 killed 8 million people doing business as usual. No failures, just doing what they do. So if we do the math and run the numbers on that, we can see they would require 2,857 critical nuclear reactor failures to equal 1 year of fossil fuel pollution, business as usual. Although we'd prefer for no deaths to happen, the worst case scenario for nuclear is a drop in the bucket compared to fossil fuels. So, with this, the safety, regulations, and worst case scenario covered, nuclear energy is the safest, most waste regulated, and least dangerous on a macro scale way we have to acquire the precious energy that we need. The methodical approach taken to nuclear energy not only makes it the best option we have, but the best way to kick out the fossil fuels we all want gone. So with this, I would like to promote a better, cleaner future for us and the people after us. Thank you.